A Place in the Sun, Chapter 4. The Royal House. The keeper of the cloth rushed forward, the sheer robe draped over his arms, billowing like sails luffing on the Nile. The harpist closed her eyes against the racing crisscross of servants, but she couldn't close her eyes to the slapping of their sandals echoing inside the royal chamber. She struggled to keep her tempo slow and soothing. Ramses II sat, his head tilted back, while a Nubian slave outlined his eyes in black. A servant bowed to the chief administrator and handed him a papyrus scroll. Neferanpet broke the seal. The harpist in the corner ended her piece and looked to Neferanpet for instructions. He nodded for her to continue. Her strokes tumbled, note over note, like water rippling over stones. No hunting today. Ramses fidgeted under the full-length linen tunic his slaves had pulled over his head. He preferred the freedom of the short kilt. The arthritis in his hip was bothering him again today. "I'm afraid not, sir. Are the priests of Karnak ready?" "They await your presence." "Good. And all is ready at the temple of Luxor to receive the procession?" "Messengers indicate that all is ready." The pharaoh's son, Merneptah, sat cross-legged in the corner on the limestone floor. A servant darted across the chamber. She dropped to the ground at Ramses' feet, pressing her forehead to the floor. She held out an inlaid box, its lid thrown back. Merneptah pretended the servant was presenting the jewels to him. "I am the pharaoh," he thought, "the divine one. The harp is plucked for my pleasure. My subjects line the streets, waiting for days for just a glimpse of me. I raise my hand and women faint and grown men cry. They tell their grandchildren the story of the day I passed inches from them." A servant rushed past Merneptah. The breeze in the wake of her skirts roused him from his daydream. "Father, will I be allowed inside the temple?" Merneptah asked. He wanted to see the inner sanctum. Once, escaping the watchful eye of his nurse, he had woven his way among the columns to the great hall, but he had stopped there. He was frightened. What secrets were inside? Only the priest and his father were allowed to enter. He was afraid the gods would curse him if he looked into the sacred chamber. He had let his nurse find him far from the temple of Karnak, so no one would see his fear and remember it. Ramses smiled at his son. He knew that Merneptah dreamed of being pharaoh just as he had when his father Seti had ruled. "You will wait with your brothers and sisters until the procession begins. Then you will follow me just as Amun's son follows him." The keeper of the diadem entered the room, bowed his head, and presented the solar headdress. 4 golden cobras coiled the ram's head, wrapping around the horns, each balancing a solar disk on its hood. In the center of the crown, a 5th cobra stood, symbol of the divine rule. "Will there be crowds?" Merneptah asked, unrolling his sitting mat by his father's feet. His slave rushed in to help, but Merneptah brushed him aside. Ramses raised one eyebrow at Neferanpet, who smiled behind the scroll and raised the unfurled papyrus higher to hide his amusement. Merneptah would one day see that there was more to being pharaoh than being cheered by crowds. Neferanpet chuckled, then cleared his throat and faked a cough to disguise the sound. "All in the 2 lands will cheer you, my son." Ramses bent over to allow the keeper to place the headdress on his head. Ramses saw the broken seal on the scroll Neferanpet held. "What news of Abu Simbel?" Ramses asked his administrator. "The engineers are surveying the site." "Only fresh-cut stones. At Abu Simbel, I'll have no defacing of the tombs of those who came before me." "They believe the temple can be cut into the cliffs. No additional stone should be necessary." Ramses raised an eyebrow, waiting for more. It was not like his administrator to give short answers. "What is it, Neferanpet?" "It's nothing, really, just rumor from the guard. They were sent to arrest a boy this morning, no older than Merneptah." "What caused you to think of this?" "The cobras, your majesty." Neferanpet pointed to the headdress. "This boy's father was bitten by a cobra." "What crime is that?" "I would not have heard of it if it weren't for the statue." "Statue?" "It seems the boy was carving a statue of Sekhmet. He hoped to please her, that she might rid his father of the cobra's poison. Neferanpet carefully rolled the papyrus scrolls closed. The guards speak of it in whispers. When they arrested the boy, they swear the statue cursed them. A boy carved this statue that causes my guards to tremble? I still see no reason to arrest him. My trembling guards, though? He killed a dove, great one. Perhaps the statue itself is cursed. A servant adjusted an embroidered belt around the pharaoh's waist. The guards seem to think not beloved of Amun. They seem to feel the statue intends to protect its creator from the executioner. Merneptah tugged on the ankh that hung from his father's belt. Couldn't this boy plead his case to Amun at the temple gates? The pharaoh pulled the symbol of life from his son's hand. You have been studying affairs of state. He was pleased. Something more than the crowds and the parades interested his son, after all. Eager to show his father how much he had learned, Merneptah raced on. During the festival of Opet, anyone can appeal to the god's mercy. It is the way. The courts would surely find him guilty, but with Amun, there is always a chance for mercy. Ramses put a hand on the boy's flushed cheek. It shall be done. To Neferanpet, he said, send a messenger. Merneptah knew he had pleased his father. Some day I will make him really proud. He will smile from his tomb in the west, he thought. When I am pharaoh, the people will worship me like no other. I will stand in the temple hall, and they will chant my name. Merneptah, 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 Merneptah. His mother's voice blended with the chant, then broke into his daydream. You are not bathed yet, Merneptah. Hurry, it is nearly time for the procession.